Welcome back to Magic Muggle, a Harry Potter after show. This is your host, Eric Cicada, aka Mr. Honest, back with you for another Goblet of Fire after show. We're covering 3 chapters today. Chapter 4, Back to the Burrow. Chapter 5, Weasleys Wizard Wheezes. And Chapter 6, the Portkey. These are fun introductory chapters, similar to the first few. There's a lot of setup going on here, but there's also a lot of humor. Goblet of Fire does something really smart right here. It takes us from pure dread to pure chaos, and then quietly opens the door to how big the wizarding world actually is. These 3 chapters aren't just about spectacle yet. They're about collision, contrast, and scale. Muggle life crashes into wizard life. Family chaos re-centers Harry, and then the world physically yanks him forward. And so, without further ado, let's talk Back to the Burrow. Chapter 4 is the collision point. Harry's packed. His most important things aren't clothes, they're people. The cloak from his dad, the broom from Sirius, and the map from Fred and George. All could come into play in this book. At Privet Drive, the Dursleys are panicking. Uncle Vernon puts on his best suit, not to be welcoming, but to feel powerful. He wants to show the Weasleys he is a stern and put-together man. Dudley is walking sideways through the house, hands clamped over his backside, like it's a national security issue. That alone tells you how this is going to go. He doesn't want to tail again via Hagrid. He's terrified, he's traumatized, and it's hard not to laugh. The Weasleys don't arrive in a car. They arrive through a fireplace, through flue powder. And this happened to Harry in the last book when he accidentally screwed up saying Diagon Alley and took her in a Nocturne Alley. We get to see a little bit of this again. Because the Dursleys have boarded it up, Arthur Weasley and the boys get stuck halfway, yelling, banging, and apologizing, until Arthur makes an executive decision and blasts the wall open. Dust everywhere. Electric fire launched across the room, and Arthur Weasley steps out, brushing his robes like, well, that's better. Now, this scene is funny, but the comedy comes from contrast and simply that. Arthur is endlessly polite. The Dursleys are literally horrified, and Harry is watching adults argue about manners while half the living room is missing. Arthur also does something really important here, and I find it kind of bold, especially since he just broke through their fireplace. He insists that the Dursleys say goodbye to Harry after Harry said goodbye to them. It's a big deal to him. He sees the disrespect that he only has heard rumor of from his son, and they treat him horribly. And this small glimpse of them, even just in this moment, Arthur can see that they disrespected Harry by not saying goodbye to him. And as an audience, we're almost there with Harry. They wouldn't say goodbye. But as an audience member, I'll also say I always am waiting for that moment for any of the Dursleys to let a tiny little bit of affection show up to see if they care about Harry at all. I just would love for that, and maybe we get that in the books, but definitely not in the movies. Arthur is only asking a small gesture from them, but it's respect Harry never ever gets in that house. And then the payoff lands. A dropped sweet. A forgotten toffee. Dudley's tongue grows to an absurd length, and Petunia panics. Vernon overthrows ornaments, starts throwing them at Arthur because he wants to fix the problem, because it's pretty clear that Fred and George had something to do with this. He tries to help, and he gets attacked for it. Harry leaves through green flames, the last image burned in his mind. Arthur defending himself with magic, Petunia screaming, also trying to pull out Dudley's tongue, not knowing that that's what was in his mouth. So she's causing more damage to Dudley's tongue. First it's a tail, now it's a tongue. Dudley is going to be traumatized after this. I think the whole Dursley family is. And Dudley's tongue is just flopping around like a python. That is probably a pretty positive thing for Harry to see before he goes, because they treat him so poorly. It's good to see a little bit spun back out at them. That's chapter 4. The wizarding world doesn't knock politely. It breaks in. It reminds Harry who he belongs with, who his people are, and it pulls him out. Moving directly into chapter 5, which just goes right into the next moment. It's a reset, but it's not a pause. It's reintroducing us to the world from the inside. Similar to the things she does in other books, where you can imagine someone might have just picked up this book and has not read any of the previous books. So we get a little tiny bit of recap, which is always good even for a reader. Harry lands at the Burrow and immediately learns what the prank was. Tongue Toffee. Fred and George are extremely proud. Arthur is furious, not because Dudley suffered, but because wizard-muggle relations matter to him. And that's just such a fascinating perspective. A wizard wanting to know more about non-wizards. It's the vice versa of what we're thinking when we're reading these books. Let's learn all about the wizards. We get to see the other side of things from Arthur's perspective a little bit here. That distinction does matter. Fred and George don't prank randomly. They target bullies. Arthur knows the intention isn't the same as the consequence, though. And when Molly enters, Mrs. Weasley, the temperature definitely drops a little bit. She's warm to Harry, as usual, but dangerous to everyone else. Hermione and Ginny appear. Ginny goes red instantly, and Hermione does something very Hermione-like. She removes everyone from the blast zone before the argument explodes. On the stairs, we finally hear about the Weasleys Wizard Wheezes. This isn't just joking around. There are order forms, price lists, invitations. Molly burned them. She wants security. The twins want a joke shop. That's not comedy. That's just a future argument taking shape. Then Percy appears, working, annoyed, and important. He's writing a report on the cauldron thickness and why it might need to be changed for future dangers. Ron mocks him, and Percy invokes his boss-like scripture. And right there you have it. The family split. Fred and George, impact and instinct. Percy, rules and status. Bill, quietly, proof that there's another way to succeed. Up in Ron's room, everything is familiar. Posters, noise, Pigwidgeon zooming around like a menace. Harry almost talks about Sirius, almost talks about his scar, but he doesn't. For once, he lets himself be okay. Dinner is chaos, flying knives, exploding potatoes, Molly's wand turning into a rubber mouse, and outside, gnomes are being chased like it's just another day. Tables are being magically smashed together, and Percy yells from a window, and nobody really stops. This is the Burrow. Messy, loud, and safe. Every year, Harry becomes a bigger part of the Weasley family, and that's something I really love. And it's also in this chapter that we finally get introduced properly to two Weasleys we've been hearing about for years, but actually haven't met yet. Bill Weasley and Charlie Weasley. Charlie is exactly what you'd expect from someone who works with dragons. Stocky, scarred, weathered, and built like a guy who's wrestled danger for a living and shrugged it off. He feels practical, physical, no nonsense. Then we have Bill, and he is the surprise. Harry expects like an older Percy. Rules, authority, polish, and instead gets someone genuinely cool. Long hair, fang earring, dragon hide boots. Maybe he got a little bit of that from his brother. I don't know. Confidence without arrogance. Bill quietly proves something important here. That success in the wizarding world doesn't have to mean obedience and bureaucracy. Together, Bill and Charlie widen the picture of who the Weasleys are and who a wizard can be. They're living proof that there are paths outside the ministry, paths that still matter. By the end of the night, Harry is full, warm, and peaceful. And that matters because the story is about to move. As we move smoothly into Chapter 6, the Portkey. Chapter 6 starts in the dark. Barely awake, no drama, just movement. Arthur is dressed in his version of Muggle clothes, and he asks Harry earnestly, "Do I look like a Muggle?" That's Arthur Weasley pretty much in one line. We learn Bill, Charlie, and Percy are apparating because they're adults. Only adult wizards can apparate. And that's pretty much just moving from one place to another. Something that you see in the final movies that isn't explained enough to the point where I'm thinking, did these guys just unlock fast travel? Arthur explains apparition and then drops a word that changes the tone. Splinching. Leaving half of yourself behind when you apparate. Suddenly, magic isn't that cute anymore. Arthur explains why they're walking. You can't have 100,000 wizards arriving without planning. The ministry has been organizing the World Cup for months. Arrivals staggered, anti-Muggle measures everywhere, and for people who can't apparate, Portkeys. Something I always find interesting is learning a little bit how the magic community covers themselves up, and it's all illusion. So imagine you're flying over Hogwarts Castle, except you're not. It's just a big open field. Now, when someone has the curiosity to go into that field, I don't know what the thing is. Maybe that's why Hagrid is the groundskeeper. They probably just do memory charms on them and send them back on their way. That's my guess. Portkeys are objects that transport groups at a specific time. They're unobtrusive and usually trash. Something I like, another small detail, is Mrs. Weasley getting Harry's list of stuff for Hogwarts that year. She goes to Diagon Alley alone, apparently, and gets all the stuff. What does she have, a giant bag that you can keep pulling stuff out of, How does she do it? There's probably a lot of magic involved in here carrying around all that stuff for all the kids, plus Harry. But they, nonetheless, head to the Portkey on their way to the Quidditch World Cup, which is just intriguing on its own. It turns out the last Quidditch World Cup took 5 full days. Percy does not want it to be that way because, well, he's Percy. He wants to get back to his cauldron work. They climb Sloat's Head Hill in the cold dark, slipping, panting, until they reach the top. And there it is, a moldy old boot. They meet Amos, Diggory, and Cedric. Cedric is polite. Amos is proud. Amos does what most proud parents do. He talks about Harry like he's a story his son overcame and beat. Harry shrinks. Cedric tries to soften it. Nobody is a villain here, but Harry is reminded that even here, he's always being framed by other people's narratives. Arthur checks his watch. Time. They all crowd around the boot, and Harry has this perfect thought. How strange this would look to a muggle. 9 people clutching around a boot in the dark, waiting. Arthur counts down 3, 2, 1, and then Harry feels it. Like a hook behind his navel, yanking him forward. Wind, color, impact. They land hard. It sounds a little bit more harsh than flu powder. And somehow, nearby, someone calmly records 7 past 5 from Stoat's Head Hill. No magic flourish, just logistics. And the end of chapter 6. Harry isn't just going into a match. He's being pulled into a system. A world that runs on planning, power, and consequences. So, these chapters do their job. They get Harry out of Privet Drive, they recenter him in family, and then they widen the lens. Because next, the story stops explaining how the world works and starts showing us what it does. Bagman, Crouch, the World Cup, and then the Dark Mark. That's where things stop being cozy, and I'd say these last 6 chapters have been fine. Not boring, but mostly build up, we can both agree. That's why this episode's a little bit shorter. There's not as much to talk about, but transition and a few cool character moments. My personal favorite moment is just the Dursleys meeting the Weasleys. It's classic. It's hilarious. Something that maybe the HBO show will do, because technically where we start the Harry Potter and Goblet of Fire movie is exactly where we are right now, through the Portkey into the Quidditch World Cup. And this is the first sign of the book being bigger than the movie and them having to make intentional cuts to keep the movie at the right length, because this is one of the biggest, if not the biggest book in the series. So that's where we leave things for this week. Harry's out of Privet Drive. He's grounded again in family, and the wizarding world has officially widened, not just emotionally, but logistically, politically, and structurally. These chapters are the calm before the spectacle, as we were saying. They're funny, yes, but they're also doing the quiet work of setting the board. Because next time, the story stops explaining itself. That's where the Goblet of Fire announces what kind of book this really is. If you're enjoying this chapter-by-chapter journey through the series, make sure you're following or subscribed wherever you're listening. It genuinely helps the show find other fans who love this world as much as we do. And if you've got a moment, a rating or a quick review goes a long way, especially as we head into some of the biggest chapters yet and the biggest story beats in the entire series going forward. We have a tip jar in the comments. Never expected, but always appreciated. It helps the show stay on its feet, and that will be in the description of this episode. Share the show with a friend. We want to get as many ears on our podcast as possible, obviously. and I'm having a blast doing this, so it'd be fun to share it with even more Harry Potter fans like your friends. I'm Eric, aka Mr. Honest, and this has been Magic Muggle, a Harry Potter after show. And until next week, wands down, hearts full.